All right, let's bring him in. Matthew Berry, NBC Sports Fantasy Football Analyst. Oh, we got a drum roll here. Fantasy Life newsletter. Matthew Berry hosts Fantasy Football Happy Hour weekdays, noon Eastern on Peacock. And every Sunday, he hosts Fantasy Football pregame. Wait, can we tell? I told Picture Day Ray to help Matthew. He didn't know where he was going.
First time.
Come on in. My bad, Matthew. I'm looking for better help in the back. Matt will be in Kansas City for Football Night in America, kicking off the season. That'll be Thursday, September 7th, ahead of the Chiefs and Lions on NBC and Peacock. What do you think of the Man Cave, Matthew?
Dude, this is great. I was getting a tour before I came on. It's really impressive.
Yeah.
It's amazing. And I saw some pictures of what it looked like before you guys moved in.
Yeah.
It's unbelievable. It's like two different buildings.
It was a 3-month turnaround.
That's the other crazy part to me.
Yes.
Because I mean, like you guys don't see it on air, but like all the nooks and crannies and like the lighting up above, like it's all state of the art stuff here.
Yeah.
Like it's really impressive.
Yeah. It's the man cave of man caves.
Listen, I mean, I work at NBC Sports, which they have a budget, and I'm jealous. I'm like, I've got one corner of one studio. I'm very jealous. I'm officially jealous of all this.
Okay. I go back, I think the first time I played fantasy, it was rotisserie. And I played in 1982 or 83. And I remember I won my league.
Nice.
I had a lot of Washington Redskins.
Okay.
Because they, you had Gary Clark and Ricky Sanders.
Yeah, the Smurfs.
Yeah. And, so that's what, 40 years?
Easy. I'll say this, I don't know if you know this or you remember this, but because I think I asked permission, you're like, yeah, it's fine. But, I wrote a book a while ago called Fantasy Life, and the book it's the story of my life. But in addition, woven throughout are all these like crazy stories around the obsession of fantasy football, right? And just the crazy trades people have made, the things they have done, the loser punishments, et cetera, et cetera. And there's a Dan Patrick story in there about your obsession around fantasy football. It's the phone booth story.
Yes. I had just gotten my knee cut on.
Yeah.
And my draft was at 5 o'clock. And I checked myself out of the hospital in New York. And I thought I could make it all the way to Brooklyn in time for my draft. Well, so I took out the IV. I was checking myself out, and I was drugged up.
And this is a while ago. So this is pre-computers, pre-cell phones. You're not able to do an app or anything like that.
No. And then I'm on the subway, and I'm looking at my watch, and I realize I'm not going to make it. I get out at West 4th Street, and I come up. There's a phone booth, and I did my draft on crutches, on Vicodin, and I ended up winning my fantasy draft that year.
That story. You hopped up on drugs, yes, on crutches, on a payphone in New York, doing your fantasy draft. That is in our obsession chapter right there. Because I mean, that just shows like when you're into it, you're into it.
Okay, the best story that you've ever heard relating to fantasy.
I mean, there's a million of them. I mean, I will say of that, I have a guy. This is also in the book. There was a guy that he was stationed at I'm going to mispronounce it, so I apologize. The Agram Air Base in Afghanistan, I think. So he's again, it's been 12 years since I wrote the book. But so he's stationed overseas. Like he is in the military. He is stationed overseas, and they don't get great internet there. But his draft is coming up, and so he found one place on the base outside where he could get internet. So he's doing his draft, and all of a sudden there's an air raid. There are literally bombs landing 50 yards from him, and they are like, everyone in. And he's just like, I can't. I'm in a draft. And they're like, dude, there's bombs falling around you. And he's like, I'm up in 2 picks. And so, and I need a flex, so he's just like, yeah, I know people think it was crazy, but I stayed out there and I finished my draft. He was just like, I always had the attitude and I was overseas that it's just like, when it's my time, and I'm just gonna, I'm gonna roll the dice. And he stayed out there, stayed through a bomb shower on a base, and obviously lived to tell about it. So it's an amazing story. That's the craziest one I think I've heard.
The best punishment for somebody finishing last in fantasy.
Yeah, I mean, there's define best, I guess. I've heard a bunch
Or
of great
worst.
ones. Yeah, I mean, like I've heard some great ones, right? I mean, there's, everyone's heard about the tattoo league where the loser of the league gets a tattoo, a permanent tattoo chosen by the winner. Like there is a guy walking around Omaha, Nebraska with a tattoo of Justin Bieber's face that says #YOLO swag, right? There's another guy in that same league that has a picture of me. Like that's even worse, right? That's even like, wait, what's that? Yeah, because I featured them in the book, and so that year, the loser league, the winner chose a tattoo of me, which I think is even much worse than Justin Bieber. I mean, I've heard of one of my favorites ones, and because I know you're a basketball player, and we were shooting little hoops before the show. This one's pretty good. Is how like in grade school they have those 8-foot hoops. So this one, the loser league had to go and stand under the hoop where everyone else in the league posterized them, and they shot it in slow motion. And like there's a video on YouTube. So they all just dunked on him. I think that's pretty good. There's a league in Brooklyn, New York, where the loser of the league has to dress as a lion, and the rest of the league chases him with a paintball gun and just hunts him down. I think that one's pretty good. I've also seen one where somebody has to perform as a mime. So this is an auction league, right? This is an auction league, and so everyone in this league, it's something like you get $200 of fake money. So the loser of the league in this one doesn't get the $200, and so he has to go on a street corner and perform as a mime
And beg for money?
Beg for money. Can't say why he's doing. Can't say I'm last place in a fantasy league. Has to just beg for money and can't leave until he's raised $200 in tips.
I love it. All right, give us the do's and don'ts. Give us the biggest mistake people make in fantasy, drafting-wise.
The biggest mistake, and this is going to sound super obvious, is they don't do enough research, just understanding what their league is. What are your rules? What's your scoring system? Where are you playing? And by that I mean, so people are like, yeah, I know my league. I'm like, no. Do you play 3 wide receivers or 2 wide receivers? You're playing. Is it a super flex? Are you in 1 quarterback league? Is it how big is your bench? If you have a 7-person bench, then you can take some shots on some injury prone players that high risk, high reward. And if you have like 2 IR spots, but if you have like a 3 or 4 man bench and no IR spots, like you need like kind of higher floor players, safer players. Understanding where you play, important, right? If you play on ESPN versus Yahoo, like the ADP, average draft position, on those sites are very different. So understanding, like going to the site that you're going to play, whether it's one of those or Sleeper or CBS or NFL, wherever you end up playing, is understanding where players are going on that site, because often the average draft position or the default rankings on that site greatly influence where people get drafted. So people are, they've got a minute on their clock and they're looking around and like, and just, the first 3 names that are there, they'll pick one of those. So taking whatever set of rankings, hopefully you like mine at, rotoworld.com, NBCsports.com, I'll get a plug in. But take whatever rankings you trust, bring that in, and ideally look at the ADP of that site, and you can sort of arbitrage, say, oh, this guy that I like, he's going 2 rounds later than I think he should. So, okay, I can wait a little bit on him, or that's somebody I'm going to need to reach for.
Because sometimes you get emotion there, or you can't draft somebody on a team that you hate, or you just don't like that player, even though that's the right player to take for you. So you go against conventional wisdom.
But that's okay. Like I get that question all the time. Like somebody asked me literally last night. He said, he goes, listen, I got pick 9, but I love Bijan Robinson this year. Right? Oh, I'm sorry. He said, I have pick 3. You have Bijan at 9. I have pick 3. You have Bijan at 9. I love Bijan. Is that too early to take Bijan Robinson? And I'm like, no, listen, I have him at 9 for a reason. Like, I think he's going to be very good. But no, man, like, you're not losing your league because you took Bijan Robinson at 3. Like, it's a game we play for fun. And rankings are a loose guideline of market value. That's really what they are. And so, like, you're not getting him back again. Like, if you pick 3 and you pass on him, he's not coming back around to you. So draft Bijan Robinson, man. You want to root for Bijan?
But are running backs, how valued are they in fantasy as opposed to real life?
They're more valued in fantasy than they are in real life. I mean, we're seeing this play out in the NFL, right? In terms of like, Josh Jacobs just got a deal. Saquon a little while just got a deal. Jonathan Taylor, that saga continues to go on. We know Austin Eckler isn't 100% thrilled with his situation, et cetera, et cetera. So in fantasy, they're very valuable. I will say this year more than other years, we have seen kind of a depression of of running backs. The first round is generally mostly wide receivers. There's a couple of running backs that are going in the first round. Christian McCaffrey, Austin Eckler, Bijan Robinson, Travis Kelce goes in the first round. But the rest are generally wide receivers because wide receivers are hurt less. They have a higher floor. It's more of a passing league. And I think because there's a lot of uncertainty in some backfields, people are waiting on running backs. But I just think as you approach your draft, actually, this is a great year to wait on running back somewhat because there's a lot of guys going in the 4th, 5th, 6th round, running backs that I call sort of cheap volume, right? Fantasy success comes from very simply two things: volume, opportunity, and talent. And opportunity is really volume for running backs. And so there's guys like Dameon Pierce on the Texans, Cam Akers on the Rams, Rashid White on the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, right? There's these guys, Isaiah Pacheco, I think, on the Chiefs, Brian Robinson on the Commanders. There are guys that are going like in those middle rounds that James Conner on the Cardinals. You're like, oh, well, that's not a good team. Like they're still going to touch the ball 20 times a game. 6 of the top 11 running backs last year actually played on teams that had a losing record in the NFL. So like Dameon Pierce.
Who would you take?
Dameon Pierce is going to have a monster year. Pierce is going to have a monster year.
Who would you take number 1?
Justin Jefferson.
Okay. Not even close.
I mean, it's close. Like, listen, if I was in a draft with you and you took Jamar Chase 1, you took Christian McCaffrey 1, I'm not going like, what was Dan thinking there? But Justin Jefferson, I think, has the highest. He has the most talent, the most opportunity, right? He's going to get a massive amount of targets and a passing first offense there in Minnesota. Cousins is a good quarterback and get Jefferson the ball. Like, I just think he's the greatest combination of talent and opportunity. I always say this: Justin Jefferson doesn't need to finish as the number 1 wide receiver in fantasy to be worth the number 1 pick. The idea there is not that you're trying to win your league in the first round. You're just trying not to lose it, right? And so I always talk about range of outcomes. The range of outcomes for Justin Jefferson, barring injury, is he's a top 5 wide receiver this year. Like there's no scenario where Justin Jefferson just falls off a cliff unless he gets hurt, right? And you can predict that.
But if Kirk Cousins gets hurt, then he could fall off.
I suppose so. Kirk Cousins is a pretty durable quarterback. I don't think he's really missed any time in his NFL career off the top of my head. And I don't know. I feel like Justin Jefferson's sort of quarterback proof. Like we've seen some, there are guys that are sort of quarterback proof and like they're going to scheme them open. Like, I don't know.
The best quarterback, like, is that obvious that it's Patrick Mahomes?
I have Jalen Hurts at 1 for fantasy. So I have Jalen Hurts. I have them all right next to each other, but it's Jalen Hurts, Josh Allen. I have Mahomes at 3, actually. The idea is, so 4 of the top 6 fantasy quarterbacks last year had at least 700 yards rushing. And that, in essence, what you need to be an elite fantasy quarterback these days is you need either dual threat ability, which is you're going to get fantasy points with your arm and your legs, like Jalen Hurts, like Josh Allen, or you have 35 to 40 passing touchdown upside, like Patrick Mahomes, like Joe Burrow, like Justin Herbert. I have Lamar Jackson at 4. I have Herbert at 5. I have Burrow at 6. But they're all like right there. They're all elite guys. And I think this year you want one of the top 8 quarterbacks if you can do it. So those are my top 6. I have Fields at 7, again with a rushing. Mm-hmm. And then I have Trevor Lawrence at 8. I think Trevor Lawrence takes a big step this year.
Yeah, I do too. I think he might be, up there knocking on the door of a top 5 quarterback. Who have you heard from, celebrity-wise, who have asked for some advice?
It's a pretty long list. It's a pretty long list, candidly. I've told this story before, but my favorite story is that about 10 years ago, I get a call from a guy who says, "Hey, Matthew, we're big fans of you. Can come by our league, and it's August 28th in New York, and we'd love to have you, come just sort of grade the picks, hang out." And I'm like, "Well, I don't really go to random people's drafts, and New York's like 2 hours away from me. Could I send a video for your league? Like, I'm appreciative, but I got to pass." And he goes, "Well, it's for Jay-Z's league." What time do you need me? What time do you need me?
Did you go to the 40-40 club?
Yes. So it's in a private room at the 40-40 club. And the end of that story is, again, I've told this before, but the end of that story is so I walk in and I'm a surprise for him. So the person who invited me is Mike Kaiser, who's the president of Atlantic Records. And so Kaiser invites me there and I walk into the room and I get recognized. And all of a sudden, so Jay looks at me and is just like, "Barry, get over here." And all of a sudden, this other guy says, "What? No, Barry, you sit the hell down. You don't, he's using stronger language than that, but he's just like, no, Barry, you don't move. What's going on, Hove? You don't bring Jordan to a pickup game. You don't bring Jordan to a pickup game. And so now they're yelling back and forth, and they're like, and Jay is like, shut up, Irv. Barry, get over here. And turns out the guy that was yelling is Irv Gotti, Murder Inc., Irv Gotti, like the legend Irv Gotti. I know the name, but I don't recognize him. I just think it's this loud guy named Irv. And so they're going back and forth, those two, right? They're, Jay's like, Barry, get over here. And Irv's like, Barry, don't you move. You get the hell out of here. And so they're yelling, and everyone in the room is having fun and going back and forth. And eventually, like, I'm starting to feel my oats, I'm feeling comfortable, and everyone's having fun. So I'm like, yeah, Irv, shut up and sit down. Room goes silent. And I'm like, oh God, what did I just do? Room goes silent. And it's probably like 20 seconds, but for me, it feels like 2 minutes. And like the room, like you could hear a pin drop, and then eventually like Irv goes, okay, Barry, you're all right. You can stay. And so ever since, it's unbelievable. That league is amazing. So that's my favorite celebrity that has reached out.
He's Matthew Berry, NBC Sports Fantasy Football Analyst, and you'll be able to see him in a variety of ways. Fantasy Football Happy Hour, weekdays at noon Eastern on Peacock. And then every NFL Sunday, he'll host Fantasy Football pregame at 11 a.m. Eastern on Peacock. And then you're going to be in Kansas City for the Lions and the Chiefs September 7th. It's great to see you again. I always appreciate your contributions to the program.
Well, thank you. It's good to be here, fellow Peacockian, right? We're happy to do that, and I appreciate it. I saw you backstage at Darius Rucker, where Fritzy absolutely killed it.
You mean killed it in a good way or a bad way?
I'm going to tell you, I don't know how you guys felt. I had such low expectations. I'd heard before the show that he was going to sing 2 songs, and I'm like, really?
Yeah.
2 songs.
Yeah.
And he was better than I thought he was going to be. That was my take.
But you had no expectations. You had zero.
No.
So he had to be better if you had zero expectations.
I had 0. I'm just like, all right, well, it's like it's clearly like, I know Darius. I'm in a fantasy league with Darius too, and so I know he's a good friend of yours and a friend of the show, and loves to play fantasy, loved to make a bet. And I'm just like, well, there's no way Dan's betting him somebody good to be on his show. Like, I mean, like if there's somebody that can really sing, Dan's not going to let him, it's not funny if he's really good.
Yeah.
So I'm assuming he's awful. And I thought he did what you do at karaoke, which is like pick a song you can sort of get through without embarrassing yourself. And I thought he exceeded that. Even my wife, who knows nothing about, doesn't listen to the show, but she was just like, he was pretty good. So there
Thank
you go.
you very much. I appreciate that.
I did you guys comment? Because I didn't hear the next day. Like, the only thing was, like, he kept his hands in his pockets for 2 straight songs.
Yeah.
No showmanship.
Yeah, people had a problem with that. They had some thoughts there about why Todd had his hands in his pants. Matthew, it's great to see you. We'll take a break. We'll come back. Phone calls after this.